The situation was desperate. 2nd Battalion, 442nd Infantry Regiment, 300 men, was surrounded deep in the Vosges Mountains of France. German forces had encircled them completely, cutting off all supply lines and escape routes. Artillery shells rained down constantly. Ammunition was running low. Food was gone. Medical supplies were exhausted. The wounded lay in foxholes, their cries mixing with the thunder of explosions. Radio operator Sergeant David Cohen huddled in a crater, his SCR-300 radio set clutched against his chest like a lifeline. It was their only connection to friendly forces, their only hope of rescue. But rescue seemed impossible. German positions blocked every approach route. Any relief force would be cut to pieces trying to reach them. Cohen had been sending situation reports for 3 days, each one more desperate than the last: ammunition critical, casualties mounting, position untenable. Division headquarters responded with promises of relief, but no relief came. The Germans were too strong, too well positioned. As dawn broke on the 4th day of encirclement, Cohen intercepted German radio traffic. His blood went cold as he translated the transmission. German artillery was preparing a massive barrage to annihilate the trapped battalion. The coordinates were precise. The timing was set for noon. In 4 hours, everyone in the pocket would be dead. Cohen knew what he had to do. It was absolutely forbidden, court-martial offense, possibly execution. But 300 men were going to die unless someone did something. He switched frequencies, keyed the microphone, and began speaking in flawless German. David Cohen's story began far from American battlefields. He was born in Berlin in 1922 to a Jewish family who saw the Nazi threat early. In 1935, when David was 13, his parents made the agonizing decision to send him to America to live with relatives. They would follow later, they promised. They never did. Young David arrived in New York speaking only German. He learned English in school, worked odd jobs, and became an American citizen at 18. When Pearl Harbor happened, he enlisted immediately, eager to fight the regime that had destroyed his family and homeland. But David had a secret he kept hidden from the army: he spoke German like a native because he was a native. Not just conversational German, he spoke with a perfect Berlin accent, understood military terminology, and could impersonate the cadence and authority of German officers. During basic training, David had once casually translated a captured German document that was giving intelligence officers trouble. His company commander had been impressed but warned him sternly, "Keep that skill to yourself, Cohen. The army doesn't trust German speakers in combat roles. They'll think you're a security risk or worse, a potential spy." David had taken the advice seriously. When he volunteered for radio operator training, he never mentioned his language abilities. His personnel file listed him as American-born, English only. It was safer that way. But now, surrounded and facing annihilation, that forbidden skill was the only thing that might save them. The question was whether he had the courage to use it, and whether it would work. Cohen's hands trembled as he fine-tuned the radio frequency, isolating the German command channel. The transmission was crystal clear: a German artillery commander coordinating with infantry units for the final assault on the trapped American battalion. Cohen's German was rusty from years of speaking only English, but the military terminology came flooding back. He scribbled notes as he translated: "Artillery preparation begins 1,200 hours. Fire mission, complete saturation of grid coordinates." Those were their coordinates. The American position. Duration: 30 minutes sustained bombardment. Followed by infantry assault to eliminate survivors. Cohen checked his watch: 0847 hours. In just over 3 hours, hundreds of German artillery pieces would turn their position into a killing field. The trapped battalion had no protection against that kind of firepower. Their foxholes would become graves. Then came the detail that gave Cohen his desperate idea. The German artillery commander was awaiting final authorization from a Colonel Richter at regimental headquarters. Standard procedure: No major fire mission without command approval. Awaiting confirmation from Colonel Richter. Will proceed on his authorization. Heil Hitler. Cohen's mind raced. The artillery units were ready but waiting for orders. If those orders never came, or if they were changed, the barrage might be delayed or redirected. But how could he possibly interfere with German command communications? The answer was obvious and terrifying: he would have to impersonate a German officer. On an open radio frequency. Where any mistake would expose the deception and probably get him killed. It was insane. It was forbidden. It was their only chance. The U.S. military's paranoia about German-speaking soldiers wasn't irrational, it was based on bitter experience and realistic security concerns. During World War I, several incidents of German infiltration had made commanders deeply suspicious of anyone with German language skills or heritage. The fear was that German speakers might be German agents, or might be compromised through family connections, or might simply be unreliable when fighting their ancestral homeland. In World War II, these concerns intensified. The military implemented strict policies. German-speaking soldiers were generally not deployed to the European theater. Those who were deployed were kept out of sensitive positions. Use of German except through official intelligence channels was forbidden. Speaking German on the radio could confuse friendly forces or assist enemy monitoring. Impersonating enemy forces on radio frequencies was explicitly prohibited as a violation of the laws of war. Soldiers caught speaking German without authorization faced immediate suspicion and potential charges of espionage or treason. Cohen knew all this. He also knew that what he was contemplating, impersonating a German officer on military radio frequencies, was exactly the kind of action that resulted in court-martials, imprisonment, or execution. Even if it worked, even if he saved the battalion, he would face serious consequences. The army didn't forgive unauthorized initiative, especially when it involved violating explicit orders. But Cohen had already lost his family to the Nazis. He'd crossed an ocean to fight the regime that had destroyed his childhood. He wasn't going to let 300 American soldiers die when he had the ability to save them, even if it cost him everything. Cohen took several deep breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. His hands were slick with sweat as he adjusted the radio frequency to the German command channel. He had one advantage: radio communication was notoriously poor. Static, interference, and equipment limitations meant that voices were often distorted and difficult to recognize. If he kept the transmission brief and authoritative, he might pull it off. He listened carefully to several more German transmissions, getting a feel for the proper terminology, the cadence of commands, the tone of authority that German officers used. Then, at 0923 hours, he keyed the microphone and spoke in German. "This is Colonel Richter. I have traffic for artillery command. Stand by." His voice was steady, clipped, authoritative, the voice of a Prussian officer who expected instant obedience. The response came immediately: "Artillery command standing by for Colonel Richter. Ready to copy." Cohen's heart hammered. It was working. They believed he was Colonel Richter. Now came the critical moment, the deception that would either save the battalion or expose him as a fraud. Regarding fire mission on American position grid coordinates 483 to 229. Mission is cancelled. Repeat, cancelled. Redirect all artillery to new coordinates. He gave coordinates for a position 2 kilometers away, an empty hillside. The German artillery officer's response carried a note of surprise: "Confirm cancellation of primary mission. We are prepared to execute as planned." Cohen didn't hesitate. Hesitation would reveal doubt, and doubt would reveal deception. Confirmed. Intelligence reports American relief force approaching from the west. Redirect all artillery to intercept. Execute immediately. Richter out. He released the transmit key and waited, barely breathing. Cohen sat in his foxhole, radio still clutched in his hands, listening to German communications. For several minutes, there was silence on the command frequency. Then, activity erupted. German units were acknowledging new fire missions. Artillery batteries were receiving updated coordinates. Forward observers were being repositioned. The deception had worked, at least initially. German artillery was being redirected away from the American position toward the empty hillside Cohen had specified. But how long would it last? Eventually, the real Colonel Richter would communicate with his artillery units. The deception would be discovered. German commanders would realize they'd been tricked. And then, Cohen didn't want to think about what would happen then. He checked his watch, 0947 hours. The original fire mission was supposed to begin at noon. He'd bought the battalion maybe 2 hours before the Germans discovered the deception and redirected their artillery back to the American position. 2 hours wasn't enough for rescue. The relief forces were still miles away, fighting their way through German defenses. But it was better than nothing. Cohen quickly composed a radio message to division headquarters, transmitted on the American frequency in English. "This is Cohen, 2nd Battalion. Intercepted German fire mission planned for 1,200 hours on our position. Have temporarily disrupted enemy artillery coordination. Enemy may redirect fire within 2 hours. Urgent, need immediate relief or extraction. Over." The response from division was immediate and incredulous. "Cohen, explain how you disrupted enemy artillery. What action did you take?" Over. Cohen hesitated. How could he explain what he'd done without admitting to a court-martial offense? Cohen knew he had two choices: lie about what he'd done, or tell the truth and face the consequences. He chose truth. "Division, this is Cohen. I speak fluent German. I impersonated a German officer on enemy radio frequency and redirected their artillery away from our position. I know this was unauthorized. But 300 men were about to die. Request you prioritize relief operation before deception is discovered. Will accept full responsibility for my actions. Over." The silence from division headquarters lasted so long that Cohen thought his transmission might not have gotten through. Then, "Cohen, stand by. Do not transmit further on enemy frequencies. Division commander wants to speak with you personally. Stand by." While Cohen waited for the division commander's response, he monitored German frequencies. The artillery batteries were still firing at the false coordinates he'd given them. But there was increasing radio chatter, confusion, questions, requests for clarification. The Germans were beginning to suspect something was wrong. Then, a transmission that made Cohen's blood run cold. It was a German officer, speaking with cold fury. "This is Colonel Richter. I have issued no orders to redirect artillery fire. Someone has compromised our communications. All units, disregard previous fire mission cancellation. Return to original coordinates. I repeat, return to original mission against American position. Artillery bombardment will commence in 15 minutes. Execute immediately." 15 minutes. Cohen had bought the battalion less than 2 hours. Now the Germans were returning to their original plan with added urgency. And Cohen had no more tricks left. He grabbed the microphone for the American frequency. "Division, the Germans have discovered the deception. Artillery bombardment will hit our position in 15 minutes. We need help now or we're dead. Over." Cohen knew he should stop. The deception had been discovered. Trying again would be futile. The Germans would be listening for imposters now. But he also knew that 300 men had 15 minutes to live unless he did something. So he did the only thing he could think of. He tried again. This time, he didn't impersonate Colonel Richter. Instead, he keyed the German frequency and spoke with desperate urgency. "All artillery batteries, this is Forward Observer Post 7. American relief force has broken through at grid 471 to 218. We are being overrun. Request immediate artillery support at these coordinates. Urgent. Urgent." He gave coordinates for another empty position, but this one was close enough to German lines that forward observers might actually believe Americans had penetrated their defenses. The response was immediate and chaotic. Multiple German units tried to transmit simultaneously, creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Post 7, confirm your position. Artillery standing by for fire mission. Infantry command, do we have reports of American breakthrough? Post 7, authenticate your identity code. That last demand killed the deception. Authentication codes, Cohen had no idea what the proper codes were. He released the transmit key and listened as German communications officers tried to make sense of conflicting reports. Had Americans actually broken through? Was forward observer post 7 legitimate? The confusion bought precious minutes. But then, cutting through the chaos, came Colonel Richter's voice again: all units, ignore all radio transmissions until further notice. We have an imposter on our frequencies. Artillery will fire on original American position in 5 minutes. Execute on my mark. All other units maintain radio silence. 5 minutes. Cohen had failed. What Cohen didn't know was that his radio transmissions to division headquarters had triggered a desperate rescue operation. Major General James Harrison, commanding the relief force, had been pushing his units hard for 3 days trying to reach the surrounded battalion. Progress had been slow, German resistance was fierce, and casualties were mounting. When Harrison received Cohen's message about impersonating German officers and disrupting artillery coordination, his first reaction was fury. This was exactly the kind of unauthorized, reckless action that violated every protocol and regulation. Cohen would face serious consequences. But Harrison was also a pragmatic combat commander. Cohen's actions had bought time, maybe an hour, maybe 2. And time was the one thing Harrison needed most. He immediately ordered his units to accelerate their advance, accepting higher casualties in exchange for speed. All units, this is Harrison. The surrounded battalion is facing artillery bombardment. We have maybe minutes, not hours. I want every available tank, every infantry squad, every piece of artillery moving now. Accept calculated risks. Speed is everything. Move. The relief force surged forward with reckless aggression. Tanks that would normally advance cautiously now charged ahead. Infantry units that would normally clear buildings methodically instead rushed through them. Artillery fired danger-close missions, dropping shells within hundreds of yards of advancing American troops. The advance was costly. Men died breaking through German positions that should have been reduced slowly and carefully. But the relief force was gaining ground measured in hundreds of yards per hour instead of dozens. By 10:53 hours, lead elements of the relief force were within 1 kilometer of the surrounded battalion's position. So close. But German artillery was about to open fire in 2 minutes. Cohen had one last idea. It was even more desperate than the previous attempts, but with 2 minutes until the artillery bombardment began, desperation was all he had left. He switched to the German artillery coordination frequency, the channel where forward observers directed fire missions in real time. This was more dangerous because these operators would be highly trained and suspicious after the previous deceptions. Cohen keyed the microphone and spoke in rapid, panicked German: Artillery command. Artillery command. This is Colonel Richter's headquarters. Abort fire mission immediately. Our own troops have advanced into the target area. We have friendly forces in the kill zone. Abort. Abort. The response was immediate and skeptical: authenticate. Provide authentication code. Cohen had no authentication code. But he did have something else, the ability to sound like an officer whose own men were about to be killed by friendly fire. He injected pure terror into his voice: there's no time for authentication. Our assault troops advanced ahead of schedule. They're in your target area right now. If you fire, you'll kill Germans. Check with regimental command. Check with anyone. Just don't fire. Silence. Then, We are checking with Colonel Richter. Stand by. Cohen listened to his watch tick. 30 seconds until the scheduled bombardment. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. The response came at exactly 1,200 hours, the moment the artillery was supposed to begin firing. Fire mission is delayed pending confirmation. Colonel Richter is not at headquarters. Attempting to locate him for authorization. Cohen nearly collapsed with relief. He'd bought more time, minutes, maybe. But the relief force was so close now. Maybe close enough. At 1,207 hours, lead tanks of the relief force smashed through the final German defensive line and linked up with the surrounded battalion. The German encirclement was broken. Ammunition, medical supplies, and food poured into the position. The wounded were evacuated. Fresh troops established a defensive perimeter. The surrounded battalion was saved. But the situation remained precarious. German forces still surrounded the area, and they were furious. Artillery began falling almost immediately, not the massive coordinated bombardment that had been planned, but harassment fire from batteries that were no longer under centralized control. The relief force commander, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, quickly found Cohen's position and demanded an immediate explanation. Sergeant Cohen? I'm told you speak German and have been impersonating enemy officers on their radio frequencies. Is this true? Cohen stood at attention, exhausted and covered in mud. Yes, sir. I disrupted German artillery coordination to prevent bombardment of our position. Sir, I know it was unauthorized. I take full responsibility. Morrison stared at him for a long moment. Then, you probably saved 300 lives today, Sergeant. You also violated about a dozen regulations and international laws of warfare. You're under arrest pending investigation. Hand over your weapon and radio to Corporal Davis. Cohen had known this was coming. He surrendered his rifle and the radio that had been his lifeline for 4 days. He was escorted to a vehicle for transport back to division headquarters. As he was led away, soldiers from the surrounded battalion began to understand what had happened. Word spread, the radio operator had impersonated German officers, disrupted enemy artillery, and bought time for the relief force. Men began calling out, "Thank you, Cohen. You saved us. God bless you." Cohen didn't respond. He just kept walking, knowing that gratitude wouldn't save him from a court-martial. Division headquarters interrogation room was cold and sterile. Cohen sat across from 3 officers, a colonel from intelligence, a major from the Judge Advocate General's office, and a captain who took notes. The intelligence colonel spoke first. Sergeant Cohen, your personnel file indicates you were born in New York to American parents and speak only English. Yet multiple witnesses report you speaking fluent German and impersonating German officers. Explain this discrepancy. Cohen had decided to tell the complete truth. My file is inaccurate, sir. I was born in Berlin in 1922. My parents sent me to America in 1935 to escape Nazi persecution. They were Jews. They died in the camps. I learned English after arriving in America and became a citizen in 1940. The JAG major interrupted, so you lied on your enlistment papers? No, sir. My enlistment papers asked where I was born. I wrote Berlin. They asked about languages. I wrote German and English. But during processing, someone assumed I was American-born and filled out my personnel file incorrectly. I never corrected it because my company commander advised me that German speakers weren't trusted in combat roles. The intelligence colonel leaned forward, and yet you used your German language skills to impersonate enemy officers. Did you not understand that this was forbidden? I understood completely, sir. I also understood that 300 men were going to die in. He checked his watch. It would have been 43 minutes ago if I hadn't acted. Sir, I would rather face court-martial than live knowing I could have saved them but didn't. The 3 officers exchanged glances. The JAG major spoke. Sergeant, do you understand the seriousness of what you did? Impersonating enemy forces violates the Geneva Conventions. It could be prosecuted as a war crime. Cohen met his eyes steadily. Yes, sir. I understand. I'm ready to accept whatever punishment you decide. The investigation into Cohen's actions took 3 days. During that time, he remained under guard but was treated well. Officers who interviewed him seemed conflicted, impressed by his initiative but concerned about the precedent his actions might set. The turning point came when Major General Harrison submitted his official report. Harrison was the relief force commander, a no-nonsense officer with 25 years of service and a reputation for following regulations strictly. His report was blunt. Sergeant Cohen's actions violated standing orders and potentially violated laws of war. However, his actions also saved approximately 300 American lives and prevented the destruction of an entire battalion. Context matters. Cohen acted when facing imminent annihilation. He used deception against enemy forces, not against friendly forces. His intent was clearly to save American lives, not to commit war crimes or espionage. I recommend that charges be dropped and that Cohen receive recognition for his actions rather than punishment. The JAG Review Board also submitted findings. The laws of war prohibit certain deceptions, particularly those involving false surrender or misuse of protected symbols. However, simple battlefield deception, including impersonating enemy forces on radio, occupies a gray area. While unauthorized and potentially problematic, Sergeant Cohen's actions do not clearly constitute war crimes. His intent was to delay enemy artillery, not to commit perfidy or endanger prisoners. The intelligence review was most interesting. Sergeant Cohen's linguistic abilities represent a significant intelligence asset that has been wasted due to bureaucratic error and institutional paranoia about German speakers. Rather than court-martial him, we recommend utilizing his skills properly. Recommend immediate reassignment to psychological operations or intelligence work where his abilities can be properly employed. The final decision rested with the commanding general of the N. General Robert Patterson called Cohen into his office personally, an unusual move that suggested the decision was significant. Cohen stood at attention while Patterson reviewed his file. Finally, Patterson spoke. Sergeant Cohen, I've reviewed your case thoroughly. What you did was unauthorized, reckless, and violated standing orders. Under normal circumstances, you would face court-martial. Cohen's heart sank. However, circumstances were not normal. You were surrounded, facing annihilation, and had exhausted all authorized options. Your deception saved 300 American lives. That matters. Patterson stood and walked to the window. I'm not going to court-martial you. But I'm also not going to ignore that you violated orders. Here's my decision. First, you'll receive a formal letter of reprimand in your file for unauthorized use of enemy languages and deception without proper authorization. This will ensure that no one interprets my decision as blanket approval for soldiers to improvise unauthorized operations. Second, you're being transferred to the Office of Strategic Services for intelligence work where your language skills can be properly utilized. Your new commanding officer will be briefed on this incident. Third, you're being awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action. Your citation will read, for extraordinary heroism in preventing the destruction of surrounded friendly forces through exceptional initiative and personal risk. Fourth, your personnel file will be corrected to accurately reflect your background and language abilities. The military's paranoia about German speakers is counterproductive, and your case demonstrates why. Cohen struggled to process this. A reprimand and a Silver Star simultaneously. Sir, I don't understand. Am I being punished or rewarded? Patterson smiled slightly. Both, Sergeant. Welcome to the complexity of command decisions. You did the right thing in impossible circumstances, but you also violated clear orders. The reprimand acknowledges the violation. The medal acknowledges the result. Now get out of here and report to OSS tomorrow morning. Cohen's story didn't end with his transfer to intelligence work. His linguistic skills and willingness to take calculated risks made him valuable to OSS operations for the remainder of the war. He participated in several classified operations that remained secret for decades. But his real legacy was the precedent his case established. After the war, when military policies were reviewed and updated, Cohen's case was cited in discussions about inflexible regulations versus battlefield initiative. The key lessons military analysts drew from the incident: first, language skills should be assets, not liabilities. The paranoia about German speakers had nearly wasted Cohen's abilities and could have cost 300 lives. Second, battlefield commanders need authority to make split-second decisions in extremis. Rigid rules that allow no exceptions can be deadlier than the risks those rules are meant to prevent. Third, intent matters. Cohen's deception was aimed at enemy forces to save friendly lives, not to commit perfidy or war crimes. Context is critical in evaluating unauthorized actions. Fourth, courage sometimes means breaking rules. The hardest decisions aren't between right and wrong but between two conflicting duties. Cohen's duty to follow orders conflicted with his duty to save lives. He chose saving lives. The 300 men of 2nd Battalion never forgot what Cohen did. After the war, they held annual reunions. Cohen was always invited and always attended. The first reunion in 1946, the battalion presented Cohen with a plaque that read, "To Sergeant David Cohen, who broke the rules to save our lives. We are forever grateful for your forbidden courage." Cohen kept that plaque on his desk for the rest of his life. When asked about that day in 1944, he always said the same thing: "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just a guy with a radio who spoke German and knew that 300 men were about to die." What would you have done?